So, Robert, you mentioned how the look of code matters. It's more than just getting the functionality right?
Absolutely. Clean code is about more than just the function. It's about presentation. Imagine a beautifully crafted piece of music. It's not just the notes, it's how they're arranged, how the melodies flow. Code's the same.
Okay, but how do we measure that?
Well, we establish clear formatting rules. Think of a dictionary. Every word has a specific arrangement. That clarity is critical.
So, are there rules for code formatting, or are we just hoping it looks nice?
Rules are key. Python uses indentation. JavaScript has conventions. It's about consistency. You can choose the style.
How do we ensure consistency across a team?
A shared style guide. That's the holy grail. We agree on tabs versus spaces, line length, naming conventions, and that should be documented. Then, everyone must commit.
Are there tools to enforce this?
Oh yeah, plenty. Linters and formatters in various IDEs, like VS Code, can automatically apply style. Makes life easier.
So, if someone is used to a different style, does it cause problems?
Sometimes, but the benefits of consistency usually outweigh the initial adjustment. Like learning a new language, you have to adapt.
What's a specific example of a bad formatting decision, Robert?
Imagine a function with variables crammed together on a single line, no white space, or comments scattered like confetti. It's a nightmare to read.
So, no more free-for-all?
Exactly. This approach is more about efficiency than aesthetics. Imagine maintaining a codebase where no one bothered to indent properly. It becomes a complete nightmare.
So if I have a small project, is it a waste to worry about this?
Well, not necessarily, but it's a skill you develop that will help later.
Makes sense, thanks, Robert. Okay, Robert, you've been hammering home the importance of clean, functional code. But what about formatting? Is it really that crucial?
Absolutely. It's not just about making the code look pretty. Think of it as a form of communication.
Communication? How so?
Well, imagine a complex project. Months later, someone else needs to work on it. Poor formatting means they have to decipher your thinking, literally reading the code. Clean formatting makes it crystal clear.
So, it's not just about me. It's about the team.
Exactly. Readability translates into maintainability and extensibility. Your style, that discipline you use, it survives through countless changes. Code itself may be unrecognizable, but the principles you built into the code, those are what remain.
I get that. But, isn't getting the functionality working first a priority?
Well, sure, you want to get it working, but if the code isn't readable from the get-go, you're setting yourself up for headaches later. What are your thoughts on that?
Maybe I should look at some examples. Can you give me some concrete differences?
Let's see. Presents code examples. Notice how this code is a nightmare to follow, whereas this version is well formatted. See how the formatting makes the logic clearer.
Wow, that's a huge difference. Formatting really does streamline things.
Precisely. Clear communication is key.
So, how do we strike the balance between speed and readability?
Experience helps. You learn to write readable code quickly. There are best practices, too.
Best practices, tools?
Yes. You get a clear understanding of how code should be structured, and you use tools to enforce that. It saves a lot of time in the long run.
Okay, I see the importance. What are some specific formatting guidelines?
That's a whole other discussion. Smiles. Let's dive into that more in a bit.
Hey Robert, welcome back. Today we're diving into the nitty-gritty of clean code. We've been talking about different aspects. Let's focus on this idea of vertical openness, white space. Why is that so important?
Yeah, Andrew, it's fascinating. Vertical openness in code, particularly blank lines, is a subtle but incredibly powerful technique to enhance readability. It helps the eye quickly scan and grasp the logical structure.
So, blank lines are more than just space? What are the specific ways in which vertical separation improves code?
Precisely. Imagine reading a dense paragraph without any punctuation. Blank lines in code act like punctuation, separating thoughts and ideas. They help your eyes compartmentalize the code into chunks of meaning.
Wow, that makes sense. Can you give me a quick example?
Sure. Imagine a function. The code for the input part, the processing part, and the output part, they're all separated logically. Blank lines visually group them. Without them, the code runs together, making it more difficult to track the different stages.
So, you're saying this is just a visual trick?
No, it's more. It's about separating logical sections and making the code's flow easier to follow.
I see. So, if we eliminate the blank lines, it becomes a mess?
Absolutely. The code becomes dense and harder to navigate. You'd need to invest more time to understand each chunk of code.
But isn't that a very subtle difference? Does the human eye really perceive this difference?
Absolutely. Try reading a block of code without blank lines. It's a bit like reading a wall of text without any breaks. The lack of visual separation significantly reduces readability.
Interesting. I can see that now.
And in complex projects, where many individuals contribute to a codebase, that separation helps a lot, because it's a bit more clear how to read and grasp the function of different parts.
So, it's both visual and functional.
Yes, the combination of visual cues and clear logical separation is powerful. It's crucial in maintainability, too. Years down the line, someone else might need to change the code, and clear separation becomes much easier.
Makes perfect sense. Thanks for the explanation, Robert.
Anytime, Andrew. Let's keep the conversation going. What are your next thoughts?
Robert, you've talked about readability a lot. How does this concept of vertical density play into making code easier to digest?
Absolutely, Andrew. Vertical density means grouping closely related code elements vertically. It's all about visual cues that help your eyes and brain see the connections quicker.
Makes sense. So visually grouping things that belong together is key.
Exactly. Look at these listings. The one that is tightly structured helps the reader grasp the idea faster, right?
Right. But what if, say, a really complex calculation spans several lines? Would that still be appropriate to put on one vertical line?
Good point. It depends. If the calculation's small, it belongs together. But really complex calculations and long methods might need to be broken down. But generally, the goal is to visually highlight tight relationships.
Interesting. So, what about comments? How does that impact the vertical density?
Comments that interrupt the flow of related elements disrupt the visual connection. They break the natural grouping, and that directly affects readability, you know?
Oh, I see. So comments should be placed thoughtfully, so they aren't breaking the vertical relationships of the code.
Exactly. You want comments that enhance understanding, not hinder the clear flow.
Great. So, a good rule of thumb, then, is vertical density to create a clear view of connections. But when in doubt, break things up, and comments should be part of the flow.
Yep. That's a good summary, Andrew. It's all about creating a visual hierarchy that makes the code structure obvious.
Thanks, Robert. That makes a lot of sense.
Of course. Let me know if you have more questions.
Thanks again. Okay, Robert, you've been talking about code organization. Now you're mentioning vertical ordering. Can you explain what that is in simpler terms?
Sure, Andrew. Imagine a recipe for a cake. You wouldn't list how to make the frosting before telling us the steps to make the cake itself, right? Vertical ordering in code is similar. Functions that call other functions should be above them in the code.
So, it's like high-level functions on top, calling the lower-level functions beneath them?
Exactly. This creates a logical flow, making it easier for you to read and understand the program.
But what about languages like Pascal or C++ that enforce functions being declared before use? Doesn't that create a vertical order already?
That's a good point. They force vertical ordering, but within the declaration process. The actual execution flow isn't necessarily vertical as the code runs.
So, it's about the execution flow as opposed to just the declaration order?
Yeah, you see, in our design, we put the executive summary part of code at the top, then the specifics below. That's how we prioritize higher-level logic.
Makes sense. That's a key concept. But are there downsides to this approach?
Well, in some cases, certain design patterns might not fit perfectly within vertical ordering. Extreme complexity can require a different approach for better efficiency. It's not an absolute rule.
So, a trade-off between readability and maybe performance sometimes?
Absolutely. We need to balance the clarity and maintainability vertical ordering provides with the performance needs of the project.
Okay, I think I understand. So, vertical ordering is about creating a natural flow, making it easier to understand the code's logic.
Precisely. It's one tool in a toolbox for building readable code. And remember, sometimes the best code is the code that gets the job done, as long as it's clean.
Thanks, Robert. Super helpful. Okay, Robert, we've been talking about general code formatting. Now let's talk about line width. How important is that?
Crucial. Readability suffers when lines get too long. Imagine a really long formula. It's hard to follow.
So, there's a magic number, like 80 characters?
The old 80-character rule is a relic, you know. Studies show programmers prefer much shorter lines.
Really? Can you elaborate on the studies?
Look at Figure 5.2. It shows the distribution of line lengths in a bunch of Java projects. Notice the spike around 45 characters.
Wow, that's a huge preference for short lines.
And the log scale is key. The drop-off above 80 is significant. It doesn't just drop off slowly.
So, you're saying we should aim for shorter lines, generally under 60 characters?
Not necessarily under 60, but certainly under 120. Beyond that, you risk losing track of the code.
120 characters is a lot more space than 80. What's the justification for such a high limit?
Monitors are wider now, and programmers adjust fonts to fit more on the screen. We don't want to force scrolling horizontally.
So, 120 feels like a reasonable compromise?
Yeah, but excessive length encourages carelessness and can lead to hard-to-find bugs.
Do you have any examples?
I remember debugging an issue that took me hours that was all wrapped up in one overly wide line, and ended up being a simple oversight.
Okay, Robert. That makes sense.
The 120-character limit helps enforce structure, and with good linting rules, this translates to better maintainability.
That sounds like a good trade-off between practicality and code maintainability. Thanks, Robert. Robert, you mentioned horizontal alignment in code. Could you elaborate on why you find it unhelpful?
Sure, Andrew. It's a bit of a personal preference, but I find that horizontal alignment, especially in long lists like variable declarations, can be misleading. Your eyes get drawn to the alignment rather than the actual content.
So, you're saying that the visual aspect is distracting, not helpful?
Exactly. You end up scanning along the aligned columns of variable names, perhaps missing their types entirely. What if the type is crucial to understanding the variable's purpose? It's a missed opportunity for understanding.
Makes sense. Can you give us an example of a scenario where horizontal alignment might cause problems?
Imagine a really long list of variables in a class. If you align them all perfectly, you may overlook if the class itself has too much responsibility.
Right, so you're suggesting it might hide design problems, not just minor readability problems?
Absolutely. A long list of declarations often indicates the need for class refactoring. That's a crucial thing to see.
That's interesting, Robert. You mean you might not even get to the real issue if you're just focused on the perfect formatting, right?
Exactly. Clean code is about more than just aesthetics. It's about expressing intent in a clear, concise manner.
What tools do you use, or what tools can you recommend for a better way to approach this kind of problem?
Formatting tools often automatically eliminate horizontal alignment. I strongly prefer the way those tools do it. Tools are very important for consistent and clear code styling.
I see. So, horizontal alignment can be problematic, yet sometimes useful, or sometimes merely visually appealing.
Exactly, Andrew. And you should always favor code that clearly expresses its intent.
Thanks for clarifying that, Robert. Very helpful. Hey, Robert, great to have you back. Let's talk about writing clean code today. We've touched on various aspects, but indentation seems to be a really crucial part of the equation. Why is indentation so important?
Absolutely, Andrew. Imagine trying to read a dense paragraph without any punctuation or paragraph breaks. It'd be nearly impossible to follow the train of thought, right? Code is much the same. Indentation is the punctuation and paragraph breaks that structure the code's logic.
So, you're saying consistent indentation is key to readability?
Absolutely. You can visually follow the flow of the code. Your eyes can quickly scan the code to understand which elements belong to a specific function, class, or block. Without it, you're just staring at a jumbled mess.
Gotcha. But what about those short if statements or small functions? Wouldn't keeping them all on one line save space, especially in a really large program?
Well, initially, it might look like a small space savings, but the clarity loss is huge. You're effectively hiding the scope of the code. A one-line if statement might be okay in some instances, but you will go back and regret it.
Interesting. Can you give a real-world example of how bad code can become harder to follow because of lack of indentation?
Yeah, imagine a complex algorithm with many nested loops, if statements and different blocks inside them. It's like a maze. Without clear indentation, it becomes nearly impossible to trace the execution path.
Okay, I see your point. So the goal is to make the code structure instantly obvious. Is there a way to do this without making the code unnecessarily verbose?
Absolutely. There are many coding style guides and tools that help enforce consistent indentation. It's an investment to follow indentation style rules at the beginning, but they help a lot to maintain the code's readability in the long run.
Wow, that makes perfect sense. Thanks, Robert. This has been really insightful. So, even in short blocks, maintaining proper indentation makes the code much easier to understand and maintain in the long run. How do you handle that in your own code?
I always prioritize readability. Sure, there are times I might want a one-liner, but I quickly realize it's not worth the loss of clarity.
Great. Thanks for shedding light on indentation. Hey, Robert, great to have you on the show today. So, we've been talking about writing clean code, and you've mentioned it's crucial for maintainability. What about team formatting rules? Are those really important?
Absolutely. Imagine a sprawling codebase, each file with its own inconsistent formatting. Reading it becomes a chore, right? It's like trying to read a novel where paragraphs and sentences jump all over the place.
So a uniform style is key?
Exactly. A consistent style makes the code much easier to read and understand. It's like a universal language that everyone on the team can speak fluently.
But how do you prevent the team from getting bogged down by rules?
It's not about stifling creativity. A common set of rules helps avoid misinterpretations. It's about clarity. Look at the Fitness project. The formatting rules were simple, but everyone stuck to them. It streamlined development.
So, you're saying 10 minutes is enough to hash out a style guide?
Well, the real key is collaboration. You sit down together, agree on where to put brackets, indentation size, naming conventions, and so forth. You capture those in your IDE or use pre-commit hooks.
Pre-commit hooks. I get it. So, enforcing the rules becomes automated?
Exactly. You don't have to rely on manual code review every single time. Tools can automatically prevent violations.
That sounds amazing. What about personal preference? Someone might prefer a particular indentation style.
Absolutely. The important thing is the agreement. Personal preference, of course, but a team decision for consistency.
So, is there a sweet spot between personal preferences and team uniformity?
There's a balance. The team decides on the style, the individual adheres. It's a shared responsibility for a shared product.
Interesting. So a coding style guide helps not just maintainability, but team efficiency?
Definitely. A well-defined style guide is one of the most powerful tools you can have. The benefits in developer speed and ease of comprehension often outweigh any initial time investment.
Robert, this is really helpful. Thanks for sharing your insights.
My pleasure, Andrew.
So, Uncle Bob's rules, they seem pretty straightforward. But how do these formatting rules translate to real-world code bases?
Well, Andrew, simplicity's key. Imagine a massive codebase. If everyone uses consistent formatting, the code becomes much easier to read and understand. It's like having a common language. Everyone knows where things are. This reduces the time wasted deciphering messy code.
I see. But there are trade-offs, right?
Definitely. Too many rules could lead to unnecessary rigidity.
So, about the getSortedWidth function? It seems a little complex.
Yeah. The idea is to sort the widths by line lengths. This helps find the median line width. This is important when trying to figure out the typical line length. Makes it easier to understand trends.
So, you're saying a histogram helps visualize these trends?
Exactly. It gives us a sense of the distribution.
Cool. How does this help?
Makes it easier for maintainers, developers, to quickly find patterns.
But isn't there a danger of overformatting? It seems this will introduce significant overhead.
Not necessarily. Tools like SonarLint can help enforce this kind of formatting, reducing the burden on developers. Plus, well-defined formatting rules give a good starting point.
So, you're saying this kind of formatting is about more than just style? It's about maintainability and team communication.
Absolutely. It's a foundation. Plus, it ensures your code evolves effectively.
And what about testing? Does good formatting impact testing?
Very much so. Clear code is testable code.
Right. So, formatting is like a good foundation. A common language, you said.
Precisely. Makes teamwork more effective.
Okay. So, what are some other specific formatting rules?
There are many other rules besides line width. You can explore other formatting guides by authors like Uncle Bob.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you, Robert.